Good evening, morning, afternoon, night, whenever you find it most convenient to listen to the Bonfire. I, as always, am Alan, the pole with the goal, and that goal is to remember sunscreen next time I go to an afternoon baseball game. I, as always, am joined by my lovely, lovely co-hosts, DJ.
There is a bald man staring at us right now.
And that bald man happens to be Tim.
Hello.
What a way to introduce him, DJ.
You just see just Tim's eyes staring directly at you. His head just bobbing and the eyes staring directly.
It was incredibly uncanny. So
well, now that we've all crossed the uncanny valley together.
That is true. Funny. Yeah, no. I am in a bit of pain because my arms and my forehead are a bit burnt because I went to the Sox game on Saturday, mainly for this guy right here, a Luis Robert Jr. bobblehead. As he bumps the microphone, I apologize. So let's get right into the news. And before we talk about, of course, the main topic of today, we're going to talk about the other Fire team, and that's Fire 2, who actually had a fairly good game and a comeback win against Columbus Crew 2. They improved their record to 4 wins, 2 draws, 3 losses, as well as 2 penalty wins. That puts them 4th in the MLS Next Pro Eastern Conference, and they also got 2 games in hand over the next 2 teams ahead of them, which are Cincinnati 2 and Chattanooga. Good on them for beating Columbus while the first team couldn't.
Yeah, and again, just make our little Fire 2 pitch. They're a fun team to go and watch. Their home games are free. You just have to show up. There's no concessions, but you can bring in a sealed bottle of water for your own personal refreshment. And they play a fun brand of soccer that is entertaining. Yeah.
And their next home game will be Friday, June 7th at 6 p.m. versus Chattanooga. So, especially since a lot of June games for the Fire are away, apart from the game we'll be talking next episode, good time to go out, get some sunlight, watch some really nice soccer, honestly, that Ludovic has got going on at Fire 2. So, absolutely.
Just remember sunscreen, unlike Al.
Just remember sunscreen, unlike me. Yeah, no. Because not only I went to the Sox game, but I also went to the Red Stars game right after that, and I got this nice shoulder strap bag for their Pride Night. So 2 giveaways.
This is, by the way, the second time this episode that Alan has showed something in front of the camera that you guys cannot see. So
yep,
great audio content, everyone.
Yes. So let me describe it. It's black fully. It's got these straps that say Chicago Red Stars in rainbow lettering, and on the front bottom it has the sponsors, so Rush Physical Therapy, Midwest Orthopedics, Rush, as well as the Red Stars logo in rainbow colors. There, that's a better descriptor for those who cannot see. All right, and the other little bit of news is, even though they're not a Fire player anymore, it's worth mentioning Alex Moniz, who recently went to the New England Revolution 2, has been called up to the Philippines first team, which is his first ever call-up ahead of their World Cup qualifiers.
I believe this makes Alex Moniz the second Fire homegrown to be called up for the U.S. youth national team and then end up playing for a different national team at the senior level. Because I'm pretty sure Fernandez played for Peru.
It's not that uncommon, to be honest, with dual nationals, just if they're available to be, to play for another country at a senior level. But, good for him. He's had a decent start for the Revolution 2 in MLS Next Pro so far this year, with 5 goal contributions in 9 appearances. So,
and he scored 2 against Fire 2, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's 2 of his 3 goals. But we're not going to talk about that anymore. But congrats to Moniz.
Yeah, congrats to Alex. All right, now let's move towards the main focal point of this episode, which is the game that took place for us yesterday. For you guys, whenever this episode comes out. When would this episode come out? Do you know, Tim?
It depends. We're going to try to get it on a Memorial Day, but we'll see.
All right, so
maybe the day
hopefully
after.
2 days ago, maybe 3. We'll see. in the nation's capital, on a pitch that looked rather interesting because, from my understanding, the UFL, which is a combination of the XFL and the USFL, now the DC team or the Washington team plays at Audi Field. So in a very similar way that the pitch looks after the Bears play or before the Bears play, that's essentially what DC had to deal with. So
it's even a little bit worse, to be honest. I mean, it was rough.
Yeah.
The funny thing is, it's like, I think a lot of Fire fans are like, man, it would be great if the team was once again playing at like a soccer specific stadium, so we wouldn't have gridiron marks all over the pitch.
And here we are.
Yeah. DC built a soccer specific stadium and they've got gridiron marks all over the pitch.
And just play it at FedEx. Who cares? That's what we do. Like in the sense of, people are going to be like, oh, there's not going to be enough people. Okay.
Although if you think Soldier Field isn't the nicest building in the world, oh man, FedEx is like, it's like an abandoned airport in a third world country.
That is a descriptor. I like that descriptor. All right. So, rundown essentially of the game. So 1-1 draw against DC. We had goals from Christopher McVeigh in the 20th minute, who was assisted by Steve Birnbaum, and the Fire continued their run of scoring a goal. This time it was by the captain, Kellen Acosta, in the 53rd minute in the second half, assisted by Hugo Kuipers. Grand, honestly, that we're at least scoring goals now. Hopefully we can do a bit more of that.
Just one at a time, though.
Just one. The journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So we've taken a few steps with these goals. Some things to note, I guess. Alan Aragoni, he did get a yellow card in the 36th minute. Since it's his 5th in MLS, he won't be featuring against Orlando because of yellow card accumulation. So while the losing streak has come to an end at 4 games, the winless streak is still being extended to 7. So we still haven't been winning, but yeah.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, baby steps and progress. Like at this point, the math against the Fire is pretty severe. To try to make the postseason, it's not mathematically impossible. And if they went on like an absolute heater, they would still be able to make it in. But it's certainly very much an outside chance. So I hate to say it because like we're recording this before Memorial Day, to say that like the Fire's chances of making the playoffs in MLS are remote is crazy in a way, just given the number of teams that make the playoffs and how forgiving the playoff structure is, all that. But at the same time, that doesn't mean that there's nothing to play for, and it doesn't mean that like it isn't better to have a team that is worth watching, essentially. And we've started seeing a team that is more worth watching. That
is true. And I've talked with a few supporters who are saying at this point they would rather see the team just continue to struggle. That way there could be more, I guess, rapid or radical changes. But I feel like at the same time, you still just want something enjoyable to happen, because it, like you mentioned, there's maybe it doesn't look like there's much to play for, but play for us to be happy, I guess, to at least see something cool going on, because you can still play good and not have the best result. So at least play well. That's what I'm going to say.
Yeah, I mean, that makes sense. Do we want to get into some of the stuff that was surprising before the match?
Yes. So one of the things that was dropped before the match was Shaqiri has removed himself from Chicago to Switzerland. So this could have possibly been one of his last games or for Chicago, because there's a lot of speculation that during the summer, after the Euros or whatever, he could possibly be onwards to other pastures. So this could have been the last chance what was the last game we played before this? Columbus, I'm guessing. Yeah, so the Columbus game could have been the last time we seen Shaqiri in a Fire shirt. No, we say could. So, we don't know anything, but it's possible that during the summer, it could be.
The team is actively trying to find his next location, and without explicitly saying it over the past couple press conferences when Klopas has been asked about this, he hasn't really been coy about the fact he's used the phrase natural. It's natural for, everyone to be looking essentially for a next move with the contract ending at the end of the season. So, I know the team is exploring a couple of different options to potentially move him on. If the game against Columbus was his last game, then he will finish with 69 regular season appearances for the Fire.
Nice.
Thank you, DJ.
But there's some speculation as to what made the change. Klopas did say that it was a quote last second decision, and I think it's just normal. I think at the point we're at as a group, we just needed to be focusing on one thing. And so he mentioned just Shaqiri's playing in the Euros. Their preseason Euro tune-ups start next week. The Euros themselves start in about a little bit under 3 weeks from when we're recording. So,
oh wow,
a little bit surprising that the team captain would leave before a competitive match in order to make a national team camp early, essentially before it starts, to play in friendlies that don't count when his club team desperately needs points. But here we are.
Yeah,
and ahead of a tournament where he's basically guaranteed to make the roster.
Right. And the thing is, he's been a part of the Swiss roster for, well over a decade at this point, right? So it's like the core of that Swiss team, guys like Granit Xhaka and so they have stayed together. Like they know Shaqiri. Shaqiri knows them. They know the way that they play. They know the expectations. It's not like this is anything surprising to anyone. So that again, I think makes it a little bit noteworthy that, he left. Now, I think we can speculate as to what may have gone on. Frank Klopas was asked in a press conference midweek about Shaqiri being benched for the match against Columbus, and Klopas pushed back against that language, said not benched but rotated, essentially just with the number of matches coming forward. So I guess take of all that what you will and read whatever you want between any of those lines.
Yeah. We did see some different changes and differences in Klopas's lineup against DC. One thing we saw was Tom Barlow getting his first start in the starting 11. For the most part, he's come off the bench for Kuiper's sort of substitution, usually somewhere around the 70th something minute. But nope, he gets his first start. Mueller, though, had apparently a last-minute sort of injury, had to be forced off, and Marin Haile-Selassie
pre-match. It's worth noting. So
yeah, pre-match.
He traveled with the team, but did not make the match day lineup either in the 11 or on the bench.
Yeah, because of injury. So thank you for clarifying that language, Tim. And then Marin Haile-Selassie wasn't in the 11 for the second game since coming back from injury, and Federico Navarro getting his third straight start. And of course, we did see a change in formation. Now, when they announced the lineup, they do the stupid numerical thing, which is anti-fan. Just let us see what the formation is. Let us see what you're cooking. But, which is interesting, because when you look at the highlights from the reel, it says the formation's like a 4-4-2. It kind of also at times looked like a 3-5-2. Still different formation.
And I asked, and Apple had it listed in the lineup sheet the team submitted listed it as a 4-4-2 diamond, basically. So that isn't really the way they played. I asked Kellen Acosta about it after the match, and he said it was a 3-5-2 essentially.
Okay.
Even though it's sort of funny because I've seen it listed as a 5-3-2. And
yeah, that's what I saw at one point as well. When I was trying to read the numerical lineup, I was like, are they playing with 5?
And realistically, the difference between a 3-5-2 and a 5-3-2 isn't it doesn't really exist. It just depends on game state, whether you've got the ball, whether you don't have the ball. They're the same formation essentially, and everyone's responsibilities will be a little bit different depending on individual tactics and stuff like that. But it essentially was a 3-5-2 or a 5-3-2, however you want to say it. I mean, the people that sort of would be either in the 3 or the 5. We're talking about the wing backs. So Alan Aragoni on the right and Andrew Gutman on the left to start. And you can put them in the defense if you want. They certainly have defensive responsibility. You can put them in the midfield. They certainly have responsibilities on offense. I don't know.
True.
But it was the first time that we've seen it. It is just a little surprising to me that the one thing that it wasn't ever listed as was, as a 3-5-2 is essentially the way that players described it after the match.
Yeah. Either way, we had Rafa Chihos, Carlos Duran, Pineda as sort of the 3 center backs. And then in midfield, Colin Acosta, Federico Navarro, Brian Gutierrez with the 2 wing backs of Aragoni Gutman. And up forward, 2 strikers of Kuipers and Tom Barlow. So it was very interesting. I think this is only the second time the Fire used 3 center backs.
Second time this season, and they did it a couple of times last year. It worked the first time that Klopas rolled it out. I think because it caught teams by surprise in 2023. It hasn't really worked since. They played it against FC Cincinnati in that 2-1 loss, where, to be honest, I think the team did play pretty well, and it very much was a winnable game for the Fire, so you can take of that what you will. But I thought they had a good game with this formation, and I think that we saw a lot of good things defensively that I don't think we have seen from the Fire in recent matches.
True. All right, so let's talk about some game events. So the start of the game was kind of, I don't think much really happened in that start of the game. I guess the first thing that could really be mentioned is the goal for DC that happened in the 20th minute, where essentially what ended up happening, it was like a free kick, came in, and Christopher McVeigh just was able to sort of push the ball, tap it into the net underneath Chris Brady to make it 1-0 DC in the 20th minute. And
Matthews Click, Polish international, Alan, just yeah. No, he did he had a smart move in the box. So the free kick was just inside the circle. It's played forward. Click runs into the box, then kind of doubles back a little bit. And that is just enough to give him space on Acosta, who was the person that was marking him. Then he's able to get a pass away to Christopher McVeigh, who buries it for his first goal of the season. Yeah, you could see that Federico Navarro was running after McVeigh, but he just wasn't able to do anything by the time that he extended his left foot past Brady to make a 1-0 DC. And this honestly was one of the only times that I really think that DC were able to outplay the Fire in their own box. That move was, or I guess it may have been technically just outside of it, but it was a smart move to create space. But how many times this season have we seen somebody completely unmarked in the box and able to have enough space to park a car or whatever?
Several.
But that really wasn't the case this match, except for the one time that this happened and it resulted in the goal. Yeah, and that also just sounds very similar to what ended up happening at the Red Stars game I was at, where they played and they lost 1-0 to Louisville, where Emma Sears was left completely unmarked and just was able to launch it. So I guess the Red Stars have very similar problems to what the Fire have, at least in that case. So past that, like you mentioned, the Fire did a lot better job. And especially one thing we mentioned in the preview to this game was Benteke, who leads the league by an amount when it comes to aerials. That man is just, he's that giant, plane that the U.S. Army uses. I can't remember what it's called, but that's what I sort of envision it as. Just large, gets up, thunk. A B-52? Maybe. I'm not sure. I'll look it up.
Are you talking about the carrier plane from GTA, basically?
I think so. Yeah. In any case, he's got 3 times as many aerials as the next closest player in MLS, which is just insane. Lionel Messi is the greatest player of all time. And like the number of times that he's had triple the stats of his next closest follower in any category you want to name, like it just doesn't happen. Now, obviously, we're talking about one specific thing and like a team that plays direct and like is really using him to win aerial duels and get headers, but still. He's a dangerous player in the box because of his ability. Like he can finish with his feet. He just doesn't typically do it because headers are more unpredictable to the angle and stuff like that. So the fact that the Fire, I think, were largely able to take Benteke out of the game, I think is a really good credit to their game model. And specifically, Carlos Duran seemed like the guy that was tasked with man marking Benteke through most of the match and did a fantastic job just taking out the game.
Yeah.
I think it's also worth noting Jalil Anibaba was the commentator for this game. And Anibaba was with the Fire under Klopas, and he played, I think, actually for DC for a little bit.
It's probably
he did,
why they had him on.
And actually, Anibaba mentioned that in the broadcast, I think, at one point, that he was drafted by the Fire at a time when actually not only was Frank Klopas, I don't think he was actually the coach at that point. He was just the technical director, but became the coach over the course of the season.
Why does that sound familiar?
No, Anibaba never actually played for DC. It was one of the few teams he didn't play for. However, he did really like playing against DC when he was in the Fire. I remember that because he always played out of his mind against DC.
You know, it's kind of funny. Honestly, DJ, out of all of our listeners, I think you're one of the only ones that remembers Jalil Anibaba playing for the Fire, because he did it. It must have been like ended in like 2013 or 14 or something like that, right?
I have said this before. The entire reason why the Fire went from the 2013 where they almost made the playoffs to 2014 where they were just so bad was because they traded Jalil Anibaba. So
you heard it here first, folks. So yes, other parts of the first half really to mention, there's not really much that comes to mind. There was like a shot from Andrew Gutman where, well, first of all, Gutman just knows how to ball, especially when it comes to getting into position on the left side, moving up, making something kind of happen. But then when it comes to like him actually taking shots on his own, I don't think are the best. If I remember correctly, he had 5 shots, but only one of them were actually on target.
Yeah, but he was the most dynamic player for the Fire and the one most responsible for creating offense for the team. Mm-hmm. A lot of it went through the left channel. Now, like, I think at the same time,
there seems to be a man with a gold cup in our chat now.
Oh, I think we just had Alex Calabrese join us.
We have a very... What the heck?
Alex, you joining us?
I'll turn my camera on in a sec. What are we talking about?
So, ladies and gentlemen, introducing Alex Calabrese onto the episode.
We need the like burr, 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 burr sound.
So
I didn't have my shofar prepared.
Yeah, we were just discussing DC.
Well,
I think where exactly we were at was discussing
the first half.
Well, and the strong performance, I think, of Carlos Duran
and Andrew Gutman.
Yeah.
Gutman always has a strong performance.
This is fantastic stuff right here. All right. Discussing now the second half of the DC game, which definitely saw an improvement in terms of how the Fire played. And it's, of course, where we saw the Fire goal, which came in the 53rd minute, if I'm correct, where we saw a run of Andrew Gutman, as previously mentioned. He just knows how to move into the final third on that left channel, running forward. His pass right before the final third originally goes to Acosta. He sort of gently taps it forward to Kuipers. He knows to give it right back because Kellen's free. Just taps it once, boop with his right foot to the bottom left to make it 1-1. Yay.
It was a goal from possession, right? Like it started with the Chiho's throw-in, and it just seemed like a goal from a team that knew what they were doing.
Very nice sequence. I like the combination between Kuipers and Acosta. The commentators originally tried to discredit the goal, saying it was makeshift and that they were trying to blah, 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 blah. No, I think it was just a good passing sequence. And I really like to see the combination with Kuipers in particular because his hold-up play, his combination on the ball hasn't quite been that great in the final third this season. So I was really glad to see, even though it's just one little touch, one little moment there, it hasn't quite been the level the last couple weeks that we kind of hoped coming in it would be from a DP number 9, and what the first signs were in the first couple games this season as well.
But that's what you like. That's why you hope to get a guy like this, right? Because he can make those simple movements like that look so effortless that they fooled professional commentators to think that it was a mistake, right?
Mm-hmm. They've been fooled, sure. Duped. So
they've been speculadorfed.
Yeah. So second half. Even though much didn't happen afterwards, it did seem like the Fire were playing a better game. One in comparison to, honestly, the last few games. So at least
it was the most coherent.
Yes.
For me, at least, the most coherent like half of soccer that they've played since the game against Houston. And I don't think that there is really competition.
There's no argument with that. I completely agree that it's the best 45 minutes the Fire have played in this 8-game winless run. However, I hate to be that guy, but I also feel like a big part of that was DC United falling away completely as well. They only had 5 outfield players on the bench. So they had a very thin squad. They already had some injury issues in their starting 11. And I think they kind of fell away in the second half, in large part because they've been stretched so thin. And the Fire don't really have that issue. They were able to bring 5 subs off the bench. So,
well, you say that, but I mean, but like, the team's nominal captain and most expensive player was on a plane or in a different country at that point, right? So,
and I think we all agree that many of the Fire's best moments the last couple of years have been without him too. So I don't think that's necessarily the big blow that it would be for most MLS teams on paper.
Sure, but I mean, in terms of like on paper, and like the other side of it is, it's not like they had Benteke. Like Benteke was playing, they had Matthews Click, they had like. They had Jared Stroud, like they had Di Pietro, like they had the squad that is the core of that attack that has been pretty successful so far this season. And I think the Fire did a really good job.
They're 9th. It's not like we're talking about a 5th place DC team here.
No, but they've been scoring
goals. This is a team
that's
very much Benteke plus 10 at a lot of the time. And when Benteke has a bad game, when Benteke gets isolated like the way he did when you had 3 Fire center backs who were all playing fairly well, especially Carlos Terán, and Benteke is completely anonymous in the game, no one else really stepped up because I think for me, a lot of this season, DC have been Benteke plus 10.
But that's not what they were their last match against Miami, where they did basically...
No, that was their best game of the season, even though they didn't win.
Right, and so they went from playing in Fort Lauderdale to going back home. They had a chance to build on that, and I think that part of what the Fire did was take that away from them. Just giving credit where credit's due. And like, I think Federico Navarro did a good job, like just keeping the ball out of the box. Like he was just like always there to break up that last pass, to get in the way of that player trying to advance into the box. And I think the center backs all did a pretty good job, especially like you said, Carlos Terán.
Yeah. I just feel like looking at this 11, it's not a DC United team that, yes, it was the best 45 minutes the Fire have played, but this is a DC team that if you remove Benteke, they're worse than the Fire. They're worse than New England. And B, like I said, they were stretched very thin, and they were clearly not in their best moment as well in the second half. So yes, it was the Fire's best 45 minutes in terms of controlling the game, controlling the momentum, which is not something we've seen in the last 8 games pretty much at all for more than a 5-minute span. But at the same time, it's not... If that's the bar right now, is controlling 45 minutes against this not the best ever DC United team, that's kind of a low bar. And I think
sure, but it's something to build up. And like, I mean, like the team, like we know the result against Charlotte, right? Like Charlotte is a team that I think if you look at, like, if you subtract Benteke from DC, like you basically are left with Charlotte more or less. Like they don't have a bunch of difference makers, and the team still couldn't get a result against them. So I think that their ability to do that, like DC has talent in the squad. does anyone have them picked for winning anything this season? No. But like they look like a decent team. They look like a team that is angling to make the postseason for the first time in 4 seasons. And the Fire had a half of a game, not a whole game, but where they looked like a coherent team that had a plan and had a strategy, and they made it work.
Yeah. So I guess on top of this discussion, does this game feel more like a point gain or 2 points dropped? And, you know, based on what we're hearing, it feels, I guess, more like a point game because, like, yeah, we mentioned that they're scoring, even though it's like a goal a game, that, you know, it's steps. So for me, at least, especially with that 45, it feels like maybe, I mean, now that Alex has brought up the whole DC situation, that just puts,
I mean, I think we have different opinions on it. Like, for me, the way I see it, if you want to turn a season around, if you have any hope of even getting anything from the season, this is the kind of game that you need to win. You need to get 3 points. It's the same thing as the New England Revolution game. There are some times, this was back in March, there are some times on paper where you look at an away game, which in theory could be a tricky away game, and you think, okay, a point is fine. But there are also times where that is a game you really need to get 3 points. And this Fire team right now needs 3 points in these games if they want to have any hope of doing anything this season. Otherwise, like if they're going to be, because everybody seemed fairly content with the performance, with the result. If people in this team are going to be content with a 1-1 draw at this DC United team, the Fire are not going to get anywhere this season or even close to it.
So I think you can be content with the performance, but not content with the result, which is sort of where I'm at with this. Yeah. I think that the team played pretty well. I think they did a good job. They put together a coherent defensive performance. I think Federico Navarro looked better than I've seen him look in, I don't even know how long, for long stretches of this match. Like, he looked like a 6, and for a team that, like, I still don't think really has a 6, you know? Like, we've got Kellen Acosta who plays an 8, and he can take care of defensive responsibilities, don't get me wrong, but like, that's not why the team fought so hard to bring him in. And so we didn't have someone that was willing to just like be that destroyer that comes in, eats up space, like breaks up the play before the pass happens. That happened in this match. And so, like, is this thing to build on? Yes. Is it too late to say something to build on? Yes. I think that your point is right. Like, 1 point at this stage for where the Fire are in the standings at this point in the season is not very different than a loss. Like, it isn't. They need 3 points or bust. They didn't get 3 points.
I mean, this was a team that paying so much money for Kuipers, putting so much of a full court press for Acosta, doing all this, was screaming a team that wanted to be successful this season, and they've been anything but that. So
it's also worth noting the Fire are going to be past the halfway point after Saturday. It's going to be the halfway point.
Yep.
So at this point, if any points lost, that's it.
Huge loss. All right. Any last words about the game that happened in our nation's capital, the District of Columbia?
I think that we talked about most of the players. I mean, you know, I think Gutman showed why the Fire brought him in. You know, he also showed why he's, you know, an MLS wingback and not a wingback that made it from MLS to Europe. You know, I think that we saw good play from a number of players, Federico Navarro, Carlos Terran. I think the center back, I think Chihos had his best game of the season, to be honest. Now, again, like, Alex is right. Like, other than Benteke, we're not talking about the toughest opponent, but still, earlier this season, it looked like he was in like a terminal decline where I think there were questions about whether or not he should be starting matches at all in this league. And I think that he's quietly sort of like put that away. But, you know, I don't know. So any thoughts on Tom Barlow? Because we haven't really talked about him. It was his first start.
He didn't do enough to me to be like, oh, this guy was terrible this game or this guy was good. He just kind of existed. He was one of the 22 players on the field.
He was the Chicago Fire player.
He was there
on that field.
Yeah. All right. Alex, any thoughts on his performance?
You know what? I think I liked his involvement in the goal. You might not have picked up on it unless you watched it back, because the play kind of starts with his clever movement. But other than that, pretty anonymous.
Yeah, he had some good moments pressing, I thought. We also saw him, sky a ball in a way that Fire fans haven't seen since Kasper Shabilko moved on. In what would have been a great chance. And I think that shows why, again, he's the striker that he is and not a striker that is earning 4 times, 5 times what he's earning.
Yeah. All righty dighty.
Actually, one more thing. I guess just getting everyone's feelings about this. Shaqiri not being in the lineup. Frank Klopas described it as being a last-second decision. I guess one quick question for everyone is, do we think that it's a addition by subtraction here, or do we think that the team could have used him?
Yeah.
So I think my opinion on the whole Shaqiri thing is twofold. Well, on one hand, I think that Shaqiri has actually shown his quality quite consistently this season. Every time, well, not every game, but there are a lot of games in the season where I feel like, I feel like he's really showing what his quality is, what his passing is. But the problem is that he just doesn't fit with the way the team wants to play. It feels like he was a signing that was made kind of without the plans of tactically how the team was going to play in mind. So it just was never, ever, ever going to work. And I think that the team is going to be better without him because it's not trying to squeeze him in. It's not trying to shoehorn him into that number 10 position where he doesn't really fit with the way that the team wants to play as a number 10, where Brian Gutierrez works a lot better in that role with the way the team wants to play. You mentioned how it was a last-second decision. It really was. On Wednesday, I asked Frank Klopas, I said, when is he leaving? He said he doesn't know yet. There was no answer for 3 days. It wasn't until Friday night the decision was made that he was going to be going early to Swiss camp. And part of the thing behind that was that there was a thought that Shaqiri, kind of like before the World Cup, had this seeded thought in his head, like, what if I get injured? I'm not going to go 100%. This could be my last World Cup. This could be my last Euros. Blah, blah, blah. He's a bit distracted mentally. And that's why maybe you haven't seen the best version from the last couple of weeks, last couple of months. And I think that was part of the decision, was let him go now when he can fully focus on the Euros. Whether he comes back or not, we don't know, because the summer transfer window hasn't opened yet. I don't think anything will actually be officially sorted until after he's done with the Euro, so we can focus on that. But I do think this is the best decision for all the parties involved. But like I said, it was a decision that involved the Swiss Federation. The Swiss coach wanted to get him as early as possible so we could work with him.
Well, sure, but every coach wants to get a player as early as possible, right?
Well, no, but it was specifically because the Swiss camp doesn't actually start till Monday, and the majority of players aren't going to be there until Monday in St. Gallen, whereas Shaqiri got there, or at least left Chicago, Saturday. So he had an extra day or two with the coach, where there's been a lot of controversy and discussion in the Swiss fan base, in the Swiss media, about Yakin's use of Shaqiri, where for the last 10, 14 years, Shaqiri's been the focal point of that team, and he has not been that the last 2 years. He's been coming off the bench, still performing, but coming off the bench, playing a more limited role. And there's been a lot of conversation about that. There was some some theorizing that there was a poor relationship between him and the coach, or that Shaqiri isn't happy with the role that he's getting for the Swiss national team now. So I think it benefits Shaqiri and it benefits Yakin that they can get an extra day or two to work with him and figure out what his role is going to be and make sure that relationship is as strong as possible. Just because we all know how much the Swiss national team means to Shaqiri. We know how much Shaqiri means to Switzerland. And I think it benefits from a Swiss national team perspective, everyone involved in that. And I think from the Fire, it benefits in that they don't have a player that they're trying to shoehorn into the 11 who is also a bit distracted mentally.
So, gut feeling, do you think that we've seen Shaqiri's last game in a Fire uniform?
Me, I don't think so. I think you might see one or two more. I think he's going to leave this summer, personally, if the right offer comes. However, I think there's a very good chance that he still ends up playing 1 or 2 more games after the Euros and then might leave. It's also possible he doesn't come back. Who knows? I don't actually know because it's actually not been decided yet, and we really won't know what interest there is until we see how he performs in the Euros. I think if he has a really good Euros, Saudi Arabia becomes a very realistic possibility. But if he doesn't have a good Euros, there's no chance he goes to Saudi Arabia. So,
and I think that's the other side of it is if Frank Klopas was deciding that Shaqiri didn't necessarily have to be part of the starting 11 for him going forward, as long as he's making those decisions, putting the Shaqiri in the best window possible is essentially best for all parties, and giving him as much time as possible in the Swiss camp is a way of doing that.
There's also the potential about the buyout.
Him being on the bench against Columbus was a tactical decision. It was not an injury thing. It was not even really that much of a rest thing. It was a Frank Klopas' decision to put Xherdan Shaqiri on the bench.
And you used the phrase benched when you asked him about it, and he pushed back on that language. He said rotation.
He did, but it was a tactical decision, I can tell you. And there's also like a chance that maybe he's not the go-to guy going forward. If he wasn't starting against Columbus, who's to say he'll be the starter going forward as well? So, and I think the Fire offensively, like I said, 2023, the best offensive rhythm that the Fire had all season was when it was pre-injury Chris Mueller, Marin Haile Selassie, and Brian Gutierrez through the middle. That's the most dangerous that the Fire looked all of last season offensively. And I think we may be seeing something happening now where maybe the Fire are just better without trying to force Shaqiri into that starting 11.
And so before we put an absolute bow on the match against DC, I thought we saw more in flashes. It wasn't consistent. It wasn't every moment from Gutierrez than we've seen from him in the past few games. I don't know how everyone else felt about that.
He looked a lot more confident. And I honestly wonder if that has to do with not worrying in the back of his head that the moment Shaqiri's there, he's going to push him out of the lineup. Because you remember Ezra Hendrickson was head coach, and he said a quote in a press conference last season where I asked, will Brian Gutierrez have the opportunity to play in the middle and maybe put Shaqiri on the right? And he said, no, Shaqiri's always going to play the 10. Shaqiri is the main man. This team is going to be built through Shaqiri. And I wonder if for Guti, there's the thought for him now that I can play my best position and I don't need to worry, at least for now, about having the guy who they're paying $8 million pushing me out of my best position just because in reality of his price tag and resume.
At $8 million, it does feel like a super sub, regardless of necessarily like match-to-match performance on the pitch. And so even if you're starting, you're right. Like that's got to be in the back of Goody's head.
Mm-hmm. All right. Good talk. Now, Orlando at Soldier Field this Wednesday. Their previous result was 2-0 loss against Columbus. They are currently in 10th in the Eastern Conference. They're only 2 points out of 9th and that final postseason spot held by DC, but they do have that game in hand. Last season, they were actually fairly decent. Like they finished second in the Eastern Conference. They were hoping to compete for hardware. Now they're just competing, I guess, for a postseason spot. I mean, that's still better than what we're doing, I guess. So, yes.
Yeah, Orlando last season, if you look at their underlying numbers, I mean, they outperformed their core numbers by the most out of any team in the league. They got incredibly lucky. This season, they've sort of reverted back to where you'd think they would be, and I think that this is more or less the team that they are. Like, still the same coach, still a lot of the same players, but they just don't have insane luck going their direction. One thing they do have, Duncan McGuire, who last year was a 6th overall super draft pick with what would have been the Flyers draft pick, but they traded to Orlando as part of the Chris Mueller deal, was scoring goals left and right. Several attempted moves to England didn't materialize in ways that are comical and frankly sort of sad. But he's still been scoring goals this season, which I think surprised a lot of people, including myself. I don't know how you guys feel, DJ, Alex, Allen. I'm surprised that Duncan McGuire has been performing at the level that he has this season.
I mean, I'm just surprised that Orlando have been as bad as they have, because I thought they were going to be, again, top 3 teams, and they have not. They've been really, really, really poor, and I don't know how much longer Oscar Pereja has. Obviously, there's probably going to be a turning point when there's a team with as much quality as they have and experience from last season, and you still have Duncan McGuire, at least for now, but we'll see.
I mean, again, like, they're just performing essentially the way the numbers thought that they should perform the previous season. So I'm not sure that that's, I mean, I think a lot of us did pick Orlando to do better than they're doing now, but realistically, they're performing more or less where the numbers said they should have performed last year and where they still say they're going to perform this year. And like, you know, in terms of like spending and everything else, they're like a middle tier team. Like, they're not one of the highest spending teams in the league. Like, they've got some talent on the roster. There's no doubt about it. Like, they've also got, you know, obviously Duncan McGuire making like close to the senior minimum is an insane value play at striker for them. But I mean, we're not talking about like an Inter Miami level squad here.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I know the other thing to obviously mention is, yeah, they signed Luis Muriel and he's been a complete flop, but I feel like I don't know, did everyone not see that coming from a mile away, or was I the only one? Because for me, that was obviously going to be a failure of a transfer to put that.
It seemed like an odd choice. It seemed like a very odd choice, and
I don't know. I felt like I was in the minority when he first signed, and I said, "This is going to be nothing. This is not going to work at all." But what do I know? I guess I was right on this one.
What was it?
You know, probably a lot more than I do.
Because what I recall, what was the value on that transfer?
It was a lot. I don't remember the number, but it was fairly expensive.
I think it was like the first time that we really saw Orlando City like flashing that kind of cash, from what I can recall. Like, I think they got like Kaká on like a transfer that I think in retrospect wasn't that much money.
It was only $2 million? For some reason I thought it was more. Huh.
Yeah. Well, so in any case, that just goes to like the core point of like, I think Oscar Pereja has not had one of the most expensive squads in the league at his disposal. You know, when the Fire were shopping for a coach, I think that there was like, he was on a list of names that I think a lot of people talked about, of like, imagine what Oscar Pereja could do with the kind of spending that the Fire are willing to put behind a roster at his disposal, because he hasn't had that in Orlando. I think this season, like, they've come back down to earth. Like, they still have offensive talent, but they're giving as much as they're getting through a lot of matches.
All right. Well, the last time Orlando came to Chicago, they ended up winning 3-1. This was back in last year, and 23. So hopefully something better than that, though. It's hard to say at this point. Predictions, I guess, gentlemen?
7-0.
I like that from DJ.
You know what?
I too am going to say 7-0.
You know what? I think that the Fire are going to win, actually.
Okay.
1-0.
Go off.
1-0 off of a penalty kick. I don't know. I feel like it's going to be a lot like the Houston game earlier in the year, which is actually the Fire's last win, despite being almost 2 months ago. The Fire were the worst team in that game. They didn't deserve anything more than a point, and somehow won the game 2-1 off of a penalty kick and a really scrappy goal. I feel like after 8 games, at some point, the Fire have to win. At some point, they have to win a game. It's going to happen eventually. And you know what? Why not? Why not against Orlando 1-0 off of a penalty kick? I don't know if Kuipers or Guti will take it, but a penalty kick, 1-0. That's my prediction.
I like. Very nice.
It's kind of funny you mentioned the Houston game, because I was actually going to predict a 2-1 win, just because you're right. Like, at some point, like, you have to win games, and like, this seems like a winnable game. And 2-1, I mean, an identical score to what the team won by in Houston. By the way, the team hasn't had a lead since that match.
Oof. I'm going to go ahead and say similar vein, 1-0 win. It just has to snap. And as we've mentioned, if they've been able to hold off defensively and make less mistakes, honestly, because like you mentioned earlier, that the goal, the blunder that ended up coming up to the DC goal, we definitely saw less of that. We did see some better marking, especially against Benteke. So, and of course, Brady is Brady. Better than Tom, in my opinion. So I think it's possible.
Yeah.
And DJ, I'm guessing you're sticking to that 7-0.
I'm sticking to 7-0. I'm not saying which way, but I'm sticking to 7-0.
Okay. So it's going to be a complete blowover for which team? Only God knows.
It's going to be 7-0 and Araya is going to score everything.
Abdi Salim is going to score 3 goals for if it's 7-0.
Okay, I was going to say if it's 7, because like that kind of goes against your prediction initially.
No. I'm saying going with the 7-0 theme, Abdi Salim with 3. I don't know if he's even played this season, but shout out Abdi Salim. Syracuse national champion.
I don't think Brady gives up 11 goals or 7 goals ever.
If the Fire managed to win 7-0, Andrew Gutman has at least 5 assists and probably 1 goal.
I could see that happening, honestly. Well, I mean, if it was in a world where we would win 7-0. So, yeah. All right. Anything else to add to the Orlando topic for our lovelies of the Fire before they go off and enjoy their Memorial Day weekend, or unless they've already enjoyed it?
If the Fire don't get a result, I believe Tim said that means Klopas will have exactly 1 point per game in this tenure.
Yes. Tim did mention that.
Wait, what's the second worst? I assume that's the worst.
No. So
not even close.
Wiki.
Wait, what?
Wiki finished with 0.98 because he had 51 matches and 50 points. But I don't know. What did
Yalop
I'm pretty
have?
sure De Los Cobos had a worse one. And
I was
Yalop
going to say De Los Cabos seems like.
Well, look, I don't think that Klopas is obviously his job is under scrutiny from the fan base at the very least. I don't think anything would change after Wednesday. I think after Saturday, there's an international break coming up soon. So maybe you start to think about things, but at the same time,
my favorite song from Iceland.
It doesn't feel like he's on the brink of getting fired. Let's just say it doesn't feel like it at the very least. If things change, I mean, you know where I will be sharing things. You know where to follow me. You know where to find me. But right now, I don't think he's on the brink of getting fired. Let's just leave it there.
Yeah. By the way, Carlos de los Cobos, his record was way under a point per game.
The entire reason why Alex got on was just to share that you can now get updates on the Fire from his OnlyFans.
Whoa.
Donate to Alex's OnlyFans so we can continue this podcast.
This is unprofessional activity.
Yeah,
or highly professional activity.
I mean, hey, there's nothing wrong with having a profession on OnlyFans. I'll say that. All right,
we're so professional. We got our boss underwear for Christmas.
That is true. Matt does.
You say
you didn't get that. Yeah.
By the way, DJ is very much using the royal we in that sense.
That was DJ.
Hey, I ran it by you guys. No one said no.
Okay, so ladies and germs and they thems of the Fire, thank you for listening to this episode of the Bonfire. I hope it's as entertaining as and informative and professional as Alex said it. I, as always, am on the pull with the goal, joined by DJ Tim and poppin' guest Alex.
Yes, sir. I bet you didn't expect this when you started recording.
No one expects the Spanish Inquisition.
All right, so now Alex is the Spanish Inquisition. Nice.
That's
a reference. That's certainly
something.
All right. Just like how this team is something, but we are also something. We're all something.
So by the transitive property, Alex is calling the fire the Spanish Inquisition, just so that everyone equates that.
Well, I don't think I need to answer this question.
Okay, I don't know if that got it. He just played a sound bit of your height saying, I don't think I need to answer this question. All right. Before this gets any more convoluted than it needs to, come on, you men in red.